Alrighty, y'all. Can we talk about bad experiences getting a beta reader? Because I had a doozy. So, a few weeks ago, I signed up for a Fantasy Writers Guild on Facebook. A lot of people would post their manuscripts and ask for beta readers. And I figured it's time for me to submit mine. I need to get some feedback. So, I do so, and I get a lot of responses at first. And this first person that I start talking to wants to get my manuscript ASAP, like within the first 2 or 3 messages. I figured that's normal. They want to get started right away. So I sent it to them. And red flag number one is that as soon as I send my manuscript, that's when they ask, hey, what's your budget for this? Now, this group has a mix of paid beta readers and volunteers, and I thought by these persons' messages that they were volunteered. So I was thinking, okay, I read this wrong apparently. I quoted something that was around the number that I had seen these services offered for in the group before, and they accepted right away. So they send me their Fiverr link, and red flag number two is that the name on their Fiverr account is nowhere near the name on their Facebook account. Now, that's not, I guess, entirely out of the realm of possibility. My own name on Facebook is not the same as my legal name, but it just seemed unnecessary, you know? And I knew it was the same person because they were talking to me on both platforms at the same time, but it was just weird. And I started getting that feeling in my chest like, I want to back out of this, but I feel like I can't because I've already taken out this person's time. And so I decided instead to go forward with the order, hope for the best. And they say, okay, we'll get something to you back within a week. So as a little foreshadowing of what's to come, before I get their first draft, they mentioned to me in messages that I have mixed up the names a few times in my story. That's nothing new. I have 2 brothers in this story. Both of their names start with A. It was a pain. So I tell them, oh yeah, was it the Eric Oliver switch up? And they said, yeah. Is it Eric or Oliver? And that kind of gives me pause. I'm like, well, they're both characters in the story, so it will depend on the scene. And they said, okay, so they're interchangeable. My heart started to sink, and I said, no, it depends on the scene. And they said, okay. And then they sent me their first draft. And first impression of this draft, the formatting is very, very nice. It's very pretty to look at. It looks very professional. But as I start to go through the first couple pages to review it, some very glaring problems show up. For one, they have arbitrarily taken out all of my M dashes. Now you can take M dashes from my cold dead fingers, but even if you have a different opinion than me on that, what they had done was they had taken out the M dash, like at the end of a dialogue tag, to show that the person had been cut off, and hadn't replaced it with any other punctuation. So it was just word, quotation mark, nothing in between. It looked really sloppy. And then as I start to go through, my character names have been changed, unbeknownst to me. So, for example, one of my characters' names is Cadriel. They had split it into Cad, Riel, with this arbitrary space in between for like 9 pages. And I think the worst one was that on like page 3, one of my main characters, Oliver Kane, was spelt Palaver Kane. So at this point, it's become very clear that what has happened to this manuscript is they have run it through spell check. And anyone who's written a fantasy story, or really any story, but especially fantasy stories, in like Microsoft Word knows that spell check hates our character names. And so they will try to suggest whatever closest amalgamation they can find. And so I'm really frustrated because instead of editing and improving my manuscript, which by the way, was not what I asked them to do. They were a beta reader. They're supposed to give me feedback, but whatever. They have instead made it worse. And for me to get it to any sort of professional level, I was going to have to go through and do a lot of work to fix it and pay them money to have to do that. So I responded to them with a list of all the errors I had found within the first 100 pages and said, hey, there's a lot of issues in this. Like, are you able to go through and fix them? And so their first response was, oh yeah, we can do that. So they go back in, they send a second draft a few days later. Several of the things are not fixed yet, and I have no feedback on the story itself. I had to ask them, hey, what'd you think of my story? And they said, oh yeah, it's really good. So at this point, it's very clear that even if I could get them to a point where I felt like the feedback was worth the money, it was not going to be worth the investment of time and energy. And so I submitted a request on Fiverr for them to cancel the order as politely as I could, which was really hard for me because I am a big people pleaser at heart. They denied the request. They say, hey, this is going to hurt my ratings. Please give me a chance to fix it. And I emailed Fiverr support, and I had to go around them that way to get the order canceled against their will. The good things that came from this experience is, one, now I know what red flags to look for. I've had several other people reach out to me through the same group with the same red flags. People who use my name over and over and over in every message despite not having to. People who maybe don't write with proper spelling and grammar in a way that you can tell that they're not going to be able to polish up any of yours. People who, again, like almost demand that you send your manuscript to them, like within the first message or two. And so if you're also a newly aspiring writer and you're looking for beta readers, feel free to laugh at my pain, but at least learn from my mistakes as you do so. That's all I'm asking.